Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. Welcome to this week's very special edition of Kibbitzing with Kagan. My friend and our longtime leader and Attorney General, Brian Frosh, is with me today. Mr. Attorney General, thank you so much for taking the time to kibitz today.
It's great to be with you, Cheryl.
Thank you. So a lot of folks may not know your background. You have really been a Marylander and a Montgomery Countyan virtually your whole life. You grew up in Somerset. Why don't you talk about your childhood, your dad as a judge, and when you decided you wanted to pursue the law?
So I have to correct you. I went to Bradley Elementary, not Somerset Elementary, North Bethesda, then junior high school in Walter Johnson.
I do know what WJ, yes.
Yeah, so I am it used to be, I had to explain that I lived near DC. Nobody had ever heard of Bethesda. It was nothing. If you turned left out of our driveway, you were in farms and forests. It was very different from what it is today. And most of the folks who I went to school with had parents who were working for the federal government. And many at NIH, and I have to say my classes at North Bethesda and Walter Johnson were filled with the smartest people I've ever encountered in my life. Extraordinarily talented people. And I mean, I can say without reservation, I was the dumbest kid in my 10th grade English class.
I find that hard to believe.
Which wouldn't surprise anybody, but I surely was with an extraordinarily group of talented people. And, my father, if I may, I'll tell you sort of two quick stories about my dad, and it explains how I got interested in law and politics. My father was the son of immigrants, grew up in Denver, went to law school, drafted into the Army, fought in every major battle in World War II, could only find a job in Washington when he got back. He got a job in the government. And shortly thereafter, after 2 or 3 years, he went into private practice. And in, I think it was 1952, we got a call from somebody who had received a subpoena from the Senate Permanent Investigations Subcommittee. That was the McCarthy Committee. And my dad had just started practice, and this guy needed a lawyer, and he couldn't afford to pay for one. And my dad said he would represent him. And the guy was a bookbinder in the government printing office. And McCarthy accused him of being a communist. And my dad, when he said he would represent him, was summoned down to Capitol Hill to meet with Roy Cohn. And Roy Cohn said, "Your client's a communist. You stay in this case. You're going to be in a lot of trouble because he's in a lot of trouble. My advice to you is get rid of this guy and don't come back." And my father declined to follow that advice. He sat next to him when he testified at the McCarthy committee. And afterwards, he was denounced by McCarthy as a communist. He was fired from his job as a bookbinder in the government printing office. It caused problems. My dad was shunned in Montgomery County by the bar after that. But he ran for county council in 1958 and was elected narrowly. And he was one of the prime movers behind the county's first public accommodations ordinance. And it was an historic event. I think it was the first in the state. And when he ran for re-election in 1962, my sister remembers being with him. She was, I think, 10 at the time. She remembers being with him at a campaign event where a very large person came up to him and poked my dad in the chest and said, "I wouldn't vote for you if you were the last guy on earth."
Wow.
And I have to clean this up a little bit. He said, "You are an African-American loving Jew." And, his analysis was correct. I'm pretty sure my dad didn't get his vote. And in fact, he and every other member of the Montgomery County Council who voted for that public accommodations ordinance were swept out of office. And those are kind of the formative events for me of wanting to be a lawyer, wanting to be involved in public policy.
That's a long trajectory towards the racial and ethnic diversity and acceptance and progressive values that we have in Montgomery County now. That's remarkable. So after you graduated from Columbia Law School, you did come back here. You practiced in Rockville for a while and then decided to run for office. Why don't you talk about that?
Well, I worked on Capitol Hill for 4 years, and then I got into the practice of law. I went out to New Mexico to work on some big antitrust cases, and Ronald Reagan was elected president, and the Republicans got control of the U.S. Senate for the first time in 40 or 50 years, and my head was exploding. And in Santa Fe, New Mexico, that really didn't make much difference to anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so God told me to come back to Maryland and run for state Senate, and then totally let me down.
Yeah.
I lost to Howie Dennis.
I remember.
And 4 years later, I ran for the House.
Yep.
And,
But you got even because you became a senator. Also served 28 years in the Maryland General Assembly, which is really amazing, and 12 years as chair of the Judicial Proceedings Committee. So talk about what it was like to be a legislator representing one of the most well-educated, affluent districts in the state of Maryland.
That's right. I think it was both. The most well-educated and the most affluent. And let me say, by the way, that Howie Dennis and I became great friends after that contest between us. But the irony is, in Montgomery County, people think of Congress as their local government.
Yep.
And so, being a state senator or a delegate from Montgomery County is really not much of a thing in your neighbor's eyes, which is fine, because at least for most of my career, I could vote the way I thought was right, and it was accepted by my constituents. And it really gave me, I felt, a lot of freedom to just pursue what I thought were important policy objectives and not worry about the political consequences.
Yes. So we're going to talk a lot about your time as Attorney General, but I do want to just have you talk about your accomplishments as in the Senate and House. Talk about, you are one of the most beloved, respected leaders in the state and nationally.
Who are you talking to?
Hold on the environment in particular. So talk about climate change and talk about some of your accomplishments even before most folks were paying attention.
Well, I had a very good year, my second year in the House of Delegates, and it was more a series of coincidences. But it turned out Exxon and Texaco were exploring for oil in the Chesapeake Bay, and I thought that was a terrible idea. And I sponsored legislation to prohibit drilling for oil or gas in the Chesapeake Bay, and it sailed through the House and Senate. I mean, I can't imagine that happening today.
Yeah.
But in those days, people were so intent upon preserving and protecting the Chesapeake Bay.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't even controversial. I mean, the oil companies came in and opposed it, but nobody cared. And the promises of economic development balanced against the health of Chesapeake Bay just cut no ice.
Right.
The same year I sponsored the Maryland Recycling Act. It was the first time we had any kind of statewide initiative on recycling. And that was very controversial. It was a dogfight. And we got a pretty strong bill out of the House, got watered down a bit in the Senate. Governor Schaefer was toying about whether or not to sign it, and it got watered down a little more. But, it put this very important idea on the books. And it's been in place ever since. It's been strengthened, and it goes on. There are a lot of other environmental initiatives that I had. I mean, I was the sponsor of the Maryland Brownfields Act that allows contaminated industrial sites to be redeveloped in exchange for cleanups. And there have been thousands and thousands of acres redeveloped across the state as a result of that.
Yes.
Yeah, so those are a few of the things.
Well, and you did more as Attorney General. So what made you decide that it was time to leave the legislature and run statewide?
Well, I'd only been in the legislature for 28 years, but I thought it might be time for me to try something new. And, the stars were aligned, and I ran and won. It was really that simple. I mean, it wasn't simple. It was a lot of hard work. Any campaign is, but it looked like a good shot, and I took it.
Absolutely. Well, again, if I keep throwing platitudes and compliments at you, you're going to roll your eyes, but you shouldn't, because everyone so adores you and respects you that we all got on board.
Believe me, they don't. They don't.
All right. Well, most of us, good folks do. Before we pivot to your accomplishments as Attorney General, can we just talk about Steve Sachs, your predecessor, who passed recently, and there's a memorial service coming up. Do you want to say a few words about what you learned from him or what you admire about Steve?
Steve Sachs was a great friend and mentor to me. He's my ideal Attorney General. First of all, this is a guy, if you put it in the sports context, he's somebody who could run, throw, field, hit for power. He could do it all. He argued cases in the Supreme Court. He tried cases, important cases in the Maryland courts. He was very wise, and he was tough as nails when he had to be. One of the first challenges that he faced when he became Attorney General was a lawsuit on behalf of people who had mental illness or developmental disabilities, who were literally being warehoused in state institutions in prison-like conditions. They were surrounded by cement walls and bars, and no special treatment, accommodations, recreation. They'd committed no crimes,
right,
but they were locked up. And he said, "This is not constitutional. I cannot defend this as Attorney General." And he negotiated a deal on behalf of the state with the plaintiffs, who were the families of these folks, and set them free, really, because being mentally ill is not a crime. Being developmentally disabled, not a crime. And it's one of the many things that he did as Attorney General that was important, but it combines two. The Attorney General's job is not just to defend the state; it's to uphold the law,
right,
and it's to do justice. And it's a perfect example of those important principles, I think. And there's nobody that I admire more in public life than Steve Sachs.
That's lovely. Thank you.
And can I say one more thing about him?
Of course.
He really changed the direction of the office. He's the first person in Maryland, and maybe nationally, to say, "I'm running to be the people's lawyer." And before that, the previous AGs would have said, "Yeah, we're defending the state in that case. We're not looking beyond the little box that we're in." And Steve Sachs said, "No, that's not our job. Our job is, we have a much bigger picture, and that's justice. And that's what we're fighting for."
So do a 60-second, the office of the Attorney General, for folks who may not be familiar. How many lawyers, how many divisions, and then we'll get into some of the issues you've worked on.
So we have between 450 and 500 lawyers, depends what day of the week, what month it is, et cetera. And we represent the governor, all of the executive agencies, the General Assembly, the judiciary, basically every state agency.
Right.
And we also go to court to not just to defend those folks or press their interests, but also, to protect the citizens of Maryland.
The residents of Maryland, not just the citizens, right?
Not just the citizens, everybody who lives here.
Yes.
We, we have consumer actions that we bring, antitrust actions. We have criminal actions that we bring. We have a very small organized crime unit that goes after violent major gangs in our state and has been extraordinarily successful. That's a unit that we set up. But, we go after predatory lenders and Wall Street banks and pharmaceutical companies and all the folks who cheat Marylanders either in large numbers or do egregious things to individual consumers.
So we are recording this in June, which is Pride Month. And one of the earliest issues that you took on, both as a senator and then as Attorney General, was marriage equality. Why don't you talk about that? Because Maryland was quoted in the Supreme Court decision.
It was. First, I have to give credit to my colleagues in the Senate on marriage equality. When I first became chairman of the Judicial Proceedings Committee, I had to kill bills that were going for a constitutional amendment or a law that said marriage is between one man and one woman. We didn't have the votes to kill that in the full committee. I just had to slip them in the drawer and not bring them up for a vote.
Yeah.
When Jamie Raskin got elected to the Senate,
yeah.
And assigned to the Judicial Proceedings Committee, we had a majority in favor of marriage equality. And Rich Madalino, who was openly gay and outspoken about the need for fair treatment, the combination of having those guys in the Senate and getting a majority on our committee enabled us to pass a law. And that, I think, was a great achievement. When the Supreme Court was considering the Obergefell case, we put together a study. It was called The State of Marriage Equality in America. And we looked at every state to see the history of marriage equality initiatives. Mm-hmm. And what we found was anytime there was a court decision or a step forward, there was a countervailing initiative to push back down against it. And I mean, it showed animus toward LGBTQ folks all over the country, mm-hmm. And taking the form of official acts by legislatures and courts, et cetera. And we were very proud that study was cited by the Supreme Court in Obergefell. It was one of the many bases of their decision.
So while we're talking about the Supreme Court, let's talk briefly about women's right to choose and abortion rights. We're expecting a decision at any point. It could be coming out before this even airs. Thoughts on that? And why don't you talk about Maryland and the actions we've taken here?
Well, I was very proud. I was in the House of Delegates and got to vote for the law codifying Roe versus Wade in Maryland, which is sort of the bedrock of our protections in Maryland. And we've expanded beyond that. And I know you've played an important role in the most recent expansions, not even so recent, but for the past decade and a half or more. Maryland has solidified its support for women to make their own healthcare decisions, and we're in very good shape, I think. But the potential for the Supreme Court to take away those rights is horrifying. And we're going to be seeing women all over the country who are facing horrible choices, potentially committing acts that become criminal in their home states.
Yeah.
And many of them may be seeking help in Maryland.
Yes. Hopefully we're ready to help them get the health care they deserve. Another issue that is before us now is obviously gun violence prevention and the horror. And you've been a leader on this issue for a long time. I worked with Jim and Sarah Brady on the Brady bill and the assault weapons ban. I mean, this issue has been around a long time. What do you see as possible, and what do you think Maryland could be or should be doing since Congress is making only glacially tiny steps?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for your great work. You have been a champion of gun sense, gun safety legislation, and it's extremely important. I mean, it's hard to imagine a Supreme Court so divorced from reality that they can ignore the mass killings that go on now every week in our country, putting aside all the murders that are being committed with handguns. There was a deputy sheriff who was shot to death in Wycomico County a few days ago by a guy who was, had a criminal record and perhaps suffered from mental illness, but he shot and killed a deputy sheriff. And, this kind of stuff happens because of the Supreme Court's interpretation of the Second Amendment, because there are 400 million guns in private hands. And Maryland has been very forward thinking on this. I was the Senate lead and sponsor, along with the governor in 2013, of the Firearms Safety Act of 2013, that banned assault weapons, banned high capacity magazines, required deep background checks and permits in order to get a license to own a handgun. And then, since I've left the General Assembly, you and others have gotten red flag laws passed. We've done a great job in our state, but we're surrounded by states that permit ownership and use of handguns and open carry of handguns that threaten our residents as well as their own. And somebody asked me in a hearing this year when we were talking about ghost guns and trying to get Maryland's ghost gun law passed, which goes into effect on July 1st. He said to me, well, haven't we proved that your gun control measures didn't work because most of the guns used in crimes in Maryland come from out of state?
That's
the answer
the point.
is that is the point. You can't get one in Maryland if you're a crook,
right?
If you're violent.
Yep. Crazy. So, consumer protection, something you and I are both passionate about. You have worked on, helped senior citizens and prosecuted, investigated for-profit colleges, worked on voting rights, police brutality. I mean, there's so many more issues. I have a lot of notes. I don't know how much we're going to get to. Why don't you talk about consumer protection first?
We've done, I'm so proud of the unit that we have. It's they do a great job, and they do a wide range of different things. I mean, first of all, people should know that we field 30 to 40,000 calls a year of consumers who are in trouble. We recover 10 to 20 million bucks for them on average every year. And our consumer protection hotline number, by the way, is 410-528-8662, 410-528-8662. So if you have a consumer problem, you can call our office. We not only
we will put that on the final slide with your social media stuff.
Okay. And if people go to marylandattorneygeneral.gov and look for our consumer protection section, you'll find a wealth of material. I mean, a handbook on how to protect yourself if you're a consumer, because there are hundreds of thousands of people whose full-time job it is to steal your money. That's all they're doing.
Yep.
And they're waiting for somebody to make a mistake, and folks can lose, thousands or
Their life savings.
Absolutely.
So privacy, identity theft, all those issues, that's where we have to be vigilant, and people are even more vulnerable with the internet than they used to be decades ago. Yeah. Let's talk about police challenge, Black Lives Matter. How have you been able to step in with bad actors? Obviously, we respect those who are willing to put their lives on the line to protect our communities, but not everybody is a good police officer. Why don't you talk about that?
Well, one of the first things I did after I was sworn in was have my office put together a set of guidelines for all the law enforcement agencies in the state that prohibit racial profiling, ethnic profiling, religious profiling. We were the first AG's office in the nation to do that. And I think and hope that it's made a difference, but it hasn't eliminated the problem. And so we've worked continuously to try to assure that justice is being done in every local jurisdiction in our state. Most recently, or I guess it was in 2020, the General Assembly vested us with the power to investigate all police involved fatalities.
Yes.
So whenever there is a death that arguably results as a result of conduct by a law enforcement officer in our state, our office does the investigation, as opposed to, let's say, if the killing were in Montgomery County. What used to happen is the Montgomery County Police investigated it.
Right.
And the General Assembly thought, we want to have an independent investigation. So we're doing those. P.S. I think the best practice would be to have us prosecute them as well. But at least having us do the investigation takes it out of the hands of the police department, whose colleague has been involved in the fatality. And let me say, I don't know how many we've had at this point. I think it's 15 or 16. And actually, I was wrong. It was 2021 that the law was passed. It started a year ago, October. We've had 15 or 16. And I got to say, the vast majority of those are very clear that the officer was doing her job or his job, and sometimes under fire from somebody they had to fire back on.
Absolutely. Well, and that's the double-edged sword of police body cameras, is it protects residents as
Absolutely.
well as police officers.
Right.
Everybody gets the facts. So I still have a lot of questions, and we're running long already. Let's talk about the fact that you've had to do battle with some of another party. So Governor Hogan and you don't always agree. And obviously we need to talk about President Trump and the 4 years of challenges that posed. So let's start with Governor Hogan. Tell us about one battle, one place where you disagreed and what happened.
Well, this is more of a category than one thing, but the Maryland Attorney General doesn't have what's called common law power, which means that I can't go sue somebody because they threaten the welfare of the people of our state. And when Donald Trump was sworn in, one of his first executive orders was the Muslim ban.
Yes.
And so I had to get Larry Hogan's permission to do anything about it. And I wrote him a letter and I said, please authorize me to file suit to stop this executive order. It's unconstitutional. It's stupid, but it's discriminatory and unconstitutional as well.
Yeah.
And he said nothing. I couldn't get an answer from him. And so I turned to you I turned to the General Assembly and said, okay, look, here's issue number one. I think we can anticipate that there are going to be more.
Yeah.
You passed the Maryland Defense Act, and that gave me the authority to engage with Donald Trump on all of the terrible, unconstitutional, illegal things that his administration did. And we can come back to those in a minute. But one of the things the Maryland Defense Act said was, before I filed suit, I should give Governor Hogan 10 days notice, and he should, he must respond to that letter. And we probably sent him 100 letters, and he responded to none of them.
Zero. Wow.
The General Assembly mandated.
I did not know that.
You all mandated that he provide $1 million for our office to engage in this activity.
Yeah.
Guess how much he provided? Zero. At one point, he told us we could take it out of the money that we use for consumer protection. And we managed to cobble together a coterie of very smart folks who we worked with other attorneys general across the nation, and we got funding from the New York University Law School State Impact Center to hire 3 people to work on environmental and climate issues in the Trump, the Trump administration was generating. So we had to cobble together a force within our office to fight within the limited resources that we had.
Right.
And that was both a challenge from Governor Hogan and a challenge against Donald Trump. And as I said, we ended up with many actions against him, and it ranged from the Muslim ban to fighting against his favoring the creditors who were making life miserable for student borrowers. Landing on their side instead of protecting students, trying to undermine the Affordable Care Act, doing what I thought was the most despicable thing that a government has done during my lifetime, which is take children away from their parents when they cross the border. I mean, not because they were protecting public safety or national security. It was purely a deterrent. We're going to take your kids away if you come here. And, we fought all of those things, and we fought successfully all the terrible environmental things they did. We won 90-some% of the cases that we brought, or the results were that we ended up winning most of the things we engaged in.
Thank you. I mean, I don't even know where to say. I mean, plus you've done opioids, there's so much, but we don't want this to be a 3-hour chat here. So I kind of don't want to move on, but I'm going to suggest that we move on. There's going to be a new Attorney General. You decided not to seek re-election. Do you want to say anything about that, or should we move forward on what made you decide that this was the time to step away?
Well, the main thing is I didn't want to stay past my sell-by date. I didn't want somebody else to tap me on the shoulder and say, dude, you need to get the hell out.
Yeah.
And I was not, it looked like I had a fairly clear path to re-election, but as you know, campaigns are hard, long, and continuous.
Yeah.
And I was tired of asking my friends for money, and I hate asking people who have interests with the state for money.
Yes.
And I just decided that it'll be 36 years. That's probably enough.
It's a long time. What do you regret that you'll be leaving unfinished for your successor?
Oh my God.
Issue that's still pending, or something you're still working on?
There are dozens and dozens of them, and there's some I can't talk about a number of them, but we have we have an action against Westminster Management. This is a real estate management firm owned in large part by Jared Kushner.
Mm.
And
For those who, the son-in-law of President Trump.
Right.
President Trump. Yes.
And they did, we allege, and an administrative law judge agreed with us, that they charged illegal fees to tenants. They charged too much, beyond the legal limit for an application fee. They charged phantom fees that they weren't even incurring. They forced tenants to live in miserable conditions, did no maintenance. There were units of this. They had, I think, 15,000 units at some point or other. It's a monster case, and the administrative law judge found they had committed literally hundreds of thousands of consumer protection violations. And that case is going to go on for some time. Wish I could finish it up.
Yeah. So there is more than one candidate seeking to succeed you. I don't expect you're going to make news here with an endorsement.
Nope.
Okay. So
why don't you... I know both Katie O'Malley and Anthony Brown, and both of them are highly qualified candidates, good people, and I have confidence that whomever follows me is going to do a great job as Attorney General.
Good. I was going to ask, are there any characteristics that you think are most valuable, most important for someone coming in for either of those two? Or, yeah.
In general,
we live in a democracy. There is a Republican running. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. There are a number of important characteristics, but and putting aside, what you need in order to get here, when you are Attorney General, you gotta listen to both sides. You have to listen to everybody, and you've got to be independent. One of the hardest things, I think, in public life, and you know this, I know, Cheryl, is you got to be able to say no.
Yes. Your
friends come to you and say, I want you to do X, I want you to vote for this, I want you to do that. You got to say, I'm sorry, I disagree with you, or that's, in my case, I say, I can't do that under the law. It wouldn't permit me to do that. Or I think you're making a terrible mistake. You've got to be independent, stand up, fight, and you as Attorney General especially, it's also true of any other public official, you got to be willing to accept the consequences of making a decision that may not be the most popular, but is the right decision.
Good. So talk about your goals for the next chapter of your life. What do you hope to do? Do you expect to stay public? Will you get involved in politics? Do you want to be out of the limelight? Just give us a glimpse as to what's coming up down the road.
Well, I don't know what's coming up. It would not be appropriate for me to look for a job at this point.
Right.
But what I hope is that I'll be able to find work in climate area, in poverty, in gun safety, in one or all of those areas, so that I can continue to make a difference, even though I probably won't have the same impact as I can when I'm Attorney General.
Sure. So before we get to the Fast Five and wrap up our chat here, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to mention?
Probably a lot of stuff, but it's an endless list. I mean, every day there are 6 new things that I have to.
Yeah.
So no, I'll pass on that one.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to say, just give a shout out to your family, because Marcy, your daughters, your sister, like, you just have an incredible infrastructure, and your friends, former colleagues, and I think you're remarkable on your own, but when you add them, you're unbeatable, I think.
Well, I don't know about unbeatable, but as Luke Gehrig said, I'm the luckiest man on the face of the earth. My wife, Marcy, is tremendous support and just a wonderful person. And I have the best kids and sisters in the world. So I'm I'm very lucky.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. All right, Attorney General Brian Frosh, fast five quick questions to let folks know a little bit more about you. Question number one, name a judge that you most admire.
Well, that's a tough one because I have lots of friends who are judges. But Peter Massetti is a longtime friend, and I think he's a terrific judge as well.
Question two, what's advice that you got at some point in your life from a mentor that you'd like to share?
The first time I ran for office, I talked to a guy who had worked in the White House. And I said, I'm going to run for state senate. He said, I think you're out of your mind. He said, but if that's what you want to do, the best thing you can do is run and win. And the second best thing you can do is run and lose. I thought that was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. But in fact, that's what got me where I am, because I ran and lost, and I learned a ton.
Yeah.
I learned how to run a campaign. I learned how to I was terrified to knock on doors.
Yeah.
And, I learned how to do it, and it served very well.
That's great. Question three, what is your favorite trip, your favorite vacation or travel that you and Marcy have ever taken?
There are a lot of them. We've been very lucky, but we did a trip to Yellowstone with our kids a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking about it, because Yellowstone's washed out this week.
Yeah.
But we had a blast. It's gorgeous. Yeah. It's breathtaking. You see animals and hot springs and geysers and mountains. It's unbelievable.
I was just there during COVID, actually. That was my escape. It was great. Question four, what was the last book you read that was really profound for you?
I've had a slow period in terms of great books that I've read. I'll tell you one that I love, that I did not read recently, but it's I think underappreciated and not that well known, and that is oh my God, I just lost me. But it's A Suitable Boy by Vikram Seth. It's very intimidating. It's 1,200 pages. And I picked it up at the library, and I started it and I couldn't put it down. And I have to say, it took me maybe 2 months to read the book. Yeah. But at the end, I slowed down because I didn't want it to end. And that 1,200 pages, that says a lot.
That does. That's impressive. The last question, Attorney General Brian Frosh, the question that I ask everyone: what is your hidden secret superpower? What is the skill or talent, something you're really good at that most folks can't do?
Yes, it's getting by without a super talent.
Okay, that's crazy.
I've stumbled ahead despite the fact that I'm not the smartest person or the most popular or the best looking. I just keep putting one foot in front of the other and seem to get to good places.
Well, I'm gonna respectfully disagree with all of those characteristics, but Attorney General Brian Frosh, thank you truly for your lifetime of service as our Attorney General, as a senator, as a delegate, as an attorney, as just for everything that you've done in your life, and for the role model that you are about how to be a public servant and make a difference in this world. You inspire so many of us. Thank you for taking the time to chat today.
It's very kind of you, Cheryl, and right back at you. You're doing a fantastic job, and appreciate everything that you're doing and working on.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Stay well. Look forward to seeing you soon.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.